The first time I heard about climate change.
I first heard of climate change.
I first learned about climate change.
The first time I remember hearing about climate change.
First time I probably heard about climate change.
I first learned about climate change.
The students had just met that morning. These are their authentic and unrehearsed answers.
Hi everybody, welcome to our first ever Youth Leadership Adventures Climate Change podcast. Very exciting new offering for 2020. My name's Julie Stone and I am the Youth Leadership Manager with the North Cascades Institute.
And I'm Ellie Gasparini, the Youth Leadership Coordinator.
Cool, so you all are here to learn more about how our students think and how they feel about climate change. So before we dive into that, I want to just give you a quick overview about what Youth Leadership Adventures is. Youth Leadership Adventures is a program that takes students out on 8 and 12-day backpacking and canoe camping trips in the North Cascades. And they're mostly students from Whatcom and Skagit County. We are doing what we can to break down barriers to outdoor access and make the most inclusive program that we can, while also teaching students about climate change, helping them to connect with each other, and helping them to connect to place. As you may imagine, this year may have been a really difficult year to run a backpacking and canoe camping program. So we got pretty creative in the midst of the pandemic and trying to figure out new ways to present our program content, while keeping everybody safe, keeping ourselves safe and keeping the students safe as well. So what that looked like is us, bringing the program down to the studs, focusing in on what's really important. And we ended up with a program that was mostly distance learning with one in-person day, and the students engaging with us over Zoom and other ways to stay in touch and keep learning together as a group. And we spent a lot of time asking students questions and listening to their answers and their thoughts on climate change. So I want to hear more from Ellie about where this podcast came from. Why podcast? Tell us more.
Yeah, so we wanted to amplify the voices of the students that we work with, and instead of just the instructors hearing their answers to some of these questions, we wanted a way to share it out more widely. And we were hoping that for other students that might be listening, it could make the topic of climate change feel less taboo or scary to talk about, and help them see that there are other peers out there thinking about similar things as them. And for other listeners in general, we just wanted to give insight into what the youth perspective is and encourage other folks to think about these topics as well. To set the scene for when this audio was recorded, we spent one day kayaking with the students in person this summer. So we had 3 different groups throughout the summer, and we were sitting with students in a circle at the end of the day after having kayaked for a few hours, and we're asking them these questions. And all the students had just met that morning, but we quickly bonded after a few hours together on the water. And these are their authentic and unrehearsed answers. They didn't know the questions we were going to ask, and we kind of put them on the spot. So the questions we asked were about when they first learned about climate change, their feelings around it and the impacts they've noticed, and their thoughts about the future. So let's hear what they have to say.
I remember the first time I heard about climate change was definitely during the time Obama was being elected. I remember being a part of protests with my grandma and my mom, and I definitely learned from my parents about climate change.
The first time I heard about climate change was, I don't really remember. I just know that I've heard it my entire life. But my first clear memory of it is I was in first grade, and I made these Earth Day posters about climate change because no one else cared about Earth Day or climate change at all, so I decided to do it.
I first learned about climate change probably through documentaries like Happy Feet and my dad would try to talk to me about it, but I was still very much shielded from it until I realized also like the agriculture and the impact that it has on the earth, and particularly in the Amazon where some of my family lives, how a lot of their homes are being like moved and a lot of the habitat's being destroyed over there. So that's how it's been exposed to me throughout my life.
I think I first learned about kind of climate change probably in 2nd grade when we watched this documentary on how the glaciers were melting and how birds were kind of eating too much landfill, and just kind of started learning about how the weather's changing.
When I first heard of climate change, it was in 5th grade, and we did a unit on it, but my teacher was like, oh, it's just going up and down, it's fine. Or at least the video he picked depicted it as that, but in reality, it's both extremes. It's bad. You can have frigid cold winters or boiling hot summers that destroys places and people and things and causes horrible tragedies.
The first time I remember hearing about climate change, I can't recall the very first time. I remember hearing about global warming and stuff as a young child back when it was first becoming a buzzword. But my most distinct young memory of climate change is in 7th or 8th grade, going to the Watka Museum, going to their Vanishing Ice exhibit, which was an exhibit of photography in relation to climate change, specifically in the polar regions in the Arctic, where it's one of the areas it's going to affect most, and just all about the ice caps melting. So yeah, that was a pretty intense experience, especially as a young kid, to see that photography, and it really made an impact on me.
The first time I remember hearing about climate change was when my parents were teaching me to turn off the sink while I was brushing my teeth, and I just remember them at that moment explaining to me what it was and realizing what kind of a crisis our earth was in. And then as I came into middle school, learning more and more about the depth of it.
I don't remember the first time I've learned, or when I heard about climate change. I feel like it's been around my whole life. But when I actually learned about it was in 6th grade, and throughout middle school. And I just learned how it worked, what was happening, the politics about it, and that just made me not like it at all. Made it really sound like things were going downhill.
So the first time I heard about climate change was around 6th grade in science class, and we just learned the basics and stuff. And I might have gotten hints about it maybe in late elementary school, and then I just learned it every single year until, continuing, but I'm going into 11th grade now, so probably this year too. And the main thing I remember was this diagram that we were shown, and it was like a bowl and a sphere in the bowl, and it was rolling from side to side, and one side was an ice age and the other side was when the world was in extreme heat. And so the last ice age was the last time it rolled to the rim of the bowl on one side, and now is when it's in extreme heat. It's several feet above the bowl is where it depicted we are, and there's no chance that we could reverse it. We could slow it down, people have said.
I was really scared that the earth was going to get destroyed, but I don't know, I think I've kind of grown out of that for sure. But what I think at this point is that the earth is going to get destroyed in my lifetime. It makes me feel less worried about it, but it's still something that we would have to change.
Sources that have influenced my understanding of climate change would be my friends, who were also very strong believers of
helping the world to become better. And they taught me many things like recycling and what you could recycle, and we all were able to share our opinions.
My dad was very helpful in changing my understanding of climate change and just getting me more informed in general about, greenhouse gases, where they come from, how companies are polluting, how different industries are polluting, and what we can do to stop that.
Yeah, my understanding has shifted over the years, mostly just from learning new things about it. This is also connected to climate change. Learning that hurricanes, tropical storms, those are connected to climate. More of those forest fires, also connected to climate change. And it comes from big companies. Just start learning all that. Just gather from different places. I don't remember where. Just gathered all that. Just kept expanding the climate change image in my head. Just
I think one major shift is the sense of urgency. I think when I first heard about it, it was this big broad issue that I knew it was around, but I didn't know any statistics. I didn't know that our generation was going to be affected. And now I know that it's already happening. It's not this big boogeyman in the closet that could strike at any moment. It's already impacting our world, and that's why the change needs to happen ASAP. It's not about formulating it, it's about starting now.
My understanding of climate change has shifted because at first I thought it just affected animals and the weather and stuff, but really in reality it affects everything, not just the things that people say they do.
When I talk to my siblings now, it's always when we talk about the environment, I'm always you have to pick up your trash, our earth is dying, and it's really sad that they have to learn about it from such a young age. It's not their fault. It's a lot of responsibility and a lot of hurt to hear from such a young age, but that's the reality of it. I'm always you have to pick up your trash, turn off the water or whatever. Turn off the water while you're brushing your teeth. Just the little things that make them self-conscious about how they live their lives and how they can't do things as they normally would, because these large corporations are putting out so much waste that now it's taken on guilt for the consumers.
When I think and talk about climate change, as it becomes more and more about politics, it puts me in a very vulnerable position, especially with my friends and extended family. It feels like something that we all can't have a conversation about and agree upon, as it becomes more and more about local and presidential elections rather than the actual state of our world.
When I think about how things are going to get impacted around here and how I think about it, I'm mainly thinking how all the climates are going to be shifting northwards and southwards. So it's going to be more of a tropical climate where it's going to be warmer. The humidity levels are going to be rising. There's going to be different wildlife. I'm thinking that's just going to change everything. It's going to be going too extreme. This happens, I guess, naturally every once in a while, but this is going to really change everything. Animals are going to be migrating up and down, and everything is all this wildlife, these trees, these ferns, this grass, the moss, it's all going to be just dying and getting replaced with a whole different thing. And it might not even be reversed. It might even get worse. And I can't stand that. If anything, get colder.
Well, I used to think we'll be able to stop it easily if we just stop doing a few things, but I've learned that it's going to take a lot more than just a few people. My family doesn't have a lot of garbage compared to some people. We do a lot of recycling, but just us doing that by ourselves isn't going to make a huge impact. We need a lot more people to do that. So I guess my thinking shifted from going it's going to be easy and just a few people to everybody needs to start doing different things.
while I haven't really noticed it in my own life, I've known that people like farmers, fishers, firemen are having to adapt to those changes as they happen.
I've started noticing that in our town, it's kind of getting colder and more snowy in the winter every year, and it's getting warmer and the temperatures are rising in the summer. And I've kind of noticed that change dramatically throughout the years.
Well, I think that days are hotter in the summer and colder in the winter than they used to be. I remember one example is when I was a young child, there was no snow. Like, nobody would have snow days or like build snowmen or anything. That wasn't a thing in Bellingham. And now there's like a week of snow days a year and everyone's getting snowed in. And lots of people think that snow and cold weather is an example of why climate change isn't as much of a big issue. But actually, climate change goes both ways. It heats and it cools, and it makes storms more stormy.
An impact Washington has with climate change is the salmon spawning patterns that have changed like dramatically, and like it's harder. It's been getting harder for natives to also catch salmon, and just us local fishermen or like for sport. It's been harder because it's less and less of them coming up every year, or just like them going out to the ocean. They like to stay out there. They actually are supposed to come back like every 2-3 years, I believe, and it's taking them a while to come back, and they actually like it out there more because it's colder or warmer. Can't remember what they like the most, but yeah.
I've noticed things changing, not just like with climate change affecting things, but climate change affecting how people like feel. Like I had noticed a lot more activism around, especially where I'm from. Like a lot more people are standing up to it than there used to be now, and a lot more people are standing up to things they believe in now, in general.
When I first heard like about climate change fully, my first thought was like, oh no, we're all gonna burn to death. We're gonna get fried from the inside out. Well, then I learned that won't happen. But then, like, me and my classmates, we were talking about like how everything would eventually turn out to be like water world, where like the whole world is submerged in water. That really sounds like it's gonna suck. Well, that would be interesting. And then I just kind of got more sour and bitter, like, how can people not understand this? How can people not know about this? How can people ignore this? Like, it's obvious, and it's going to get to us eventually.
I remember feeling really sad because they're talking about the animals and how they're going extinct. And I also was super mad because I couldn't believe that like people actually let it get that far.
I did think we were just going to die of heat. And after watching numerous videos and things, it's not good. It's threatening us and the places we used to call home. So really, it's something to be taken action about. I don't like it. I don't know, but at the same time, I don't know what to do about it. It seems almost irreversible.
Like, sad and frustrated because, like, all the other animals have, like, lived here without totally destroying everything. But, like, we've brought, like, cars and a lot more of, like, greenhouse gases and a lot of stuff that they didn't produce a whole bunch of.
What makes me, like, sad when thinking about climate change is that all the lives that are being affected, when such as, like, our increasing temperatures are causing more hurricanes to become stronger and bigger. And it's kind of, like, sad to think that, like, people are, like, selfish in a way, because it's not affecting them, you know? Someone could be on the West Coast while the hurricanes are affecting the East Coast, like Puerto Rico and Texas and Georgia and Florida. And I just feel like it's important to address that. And, like, the only way to address it is if you're in harm, like right now during our pandemic. Global warming, like our climate has gone down, like our temperatures, surface temperatures have been decreasing, and that's only because their lives is at risk. Like, it only takes, like, once it's affecting them, then that's when it gets into perspective for them. And I feel like that just makes it sadder too.
My perspective has definitely changed. I went from being kind of like angry about how big it is to like now I'm kind of scared because like it is really big. There's no way one person can fix this. We all need to pitch in, and a lot of people aren't, so it's kind of scary.
I think that my peers should know that it is definitely a problem, and you should try your best to solve it. Do whatever you can, even if it's a little thing. If many people do it, then it'll make a difference.
I think it's really important to realize that a lot of people of color, like where they live, like the fast food or packaged food that they get, a lot of it isn't out of choice, it's just out of necessity. And a lot of them don't have access to the organic food or the 100% sustainable foods. And they're also like less represented in Congress and in legislation. And it's like we only have a portion of the population that's speaking up, when if we welcome more people to, I think we'll really be able to get those rural areas to buy in on we need to make some action happen, and especially like those legislators of rural areas. I don't know, we just really need to come together as one.
One thing that I would want my peers to know is that you can't just like sit around and wait for it to get better, because it won't. Like, you actually have to take action and do like things that will make it better.
I think in order for us to prevent climate change from going any further and hopefully getting better, I think as the people we need to do our part, but also we need to get our larger corporations to stop with the amount of waste and the amount of shortcuts that they take in order to make a couple extra bucks. And I think that we just gotta maybe pass some laws or something to make it better.
Moving forward with climate change, I strongly believe that we need to elect both local and national officials that will stand for renewable energy sources such as geothermal, wind, and water power. I also believe that we need to elect officials that understand how climate change affects poorer communities as well as underrepresented communities.
I think that we need to move away from petroleum-powered cars. We need to move to hybrids and especially EVs that will eliminate like probably almost half of our carbon emissions.
A better future to me would be to reduce use of plastic by probably not using plastic bags and stuff like that. And a better future would be alternatively to have maybe almost no use of plastic anymore, or at least plastic that can be very easily recycled and biodegraded.
Climate change also makes me sad. I don't know, just thinking about, again, like Turkey said, the lives that are being affected. And I think it's really sad that a lot of people don't get to like access the outdoors, and the lack of representation. So, you know, maybe only certain like socioeconomic groups can access the outdoors, while others are suffering the consequences and they're not being able to access the outdoors. I think it's just some serious inequity issues that need to be addressed. And something that makes me hopeful is that there has been growing representation, you know, in like STEM fields and being in the outdoors, and maybe with more education, people will realize the importance it is to take care of our planet.
What brings me hope is that I know so many smart people that are thinking of so many smart ways to fix this. We might not be able to fix this, but they can try, and we might be able to get somewhere better.
Not a lot, actually. Yeah, that's kind of weird to admit on a podcast like this. But climate change is one of the things that just makes me really afraid and sad to be alive. So, I guess seeing the fact that my generation is making change, I guess that kind of brings me hope. I mean, the climate marches are being led and being attended by people my age. I'm seeing more and more people recycling using lower emissions, being more conscious of their water and electricity usage. I'm seeing, not that this is necessarily related to the climate, but I'm seeing a lot of push from people in my age and my grade to cut down on their plastic usage.
Just people who can like go out and do protests or post about it on social media and like make documentaries about it, just trying to get it out there.
What brings me hope is there's definitely more focus now in the past 5 to 10 years on climate change. It's become more of a bigger focus, and a lot of bigger people are involved in it and help with it a lot.
The fact that a lot of people are trying, like this group, and like the fact that lots of people do know about it, and hopefully we can like overshadow the people that don't and teach them as well.
I think a lot of young people today on Earth are ready to face the reality of the situation and are ready to make changes as soon as they possibly can. It's just because a lot of us are young and still live with our parents that we can't make as many impacts as we'd like to.
Hope has to come from like a problem, has to be there for hope to be there. And usually you want to look towards the bright side, because like hope is what is going to like actually like make us do things. Like we hope for a better future. You have to make that happen. But as soon as you hope it, you can imagine it, and then you can start taking steps to do it. And instead of just moping about it, like, oh, it's so big, or getting scared about it, you have to hope that someday, hopefully, it will get better. And then you start thinking about, okay, it might start getting better. And you say, oh, how can I make it better? And you start taking steps to make it better.
We're here talking on September 14th, 2020, while this historical wildfire season is happening. And we're in Bellingham, where the sky is totally covered in smoke. And I've learned that this year, as many acres in Washington burned in one day than in the whole fire season last year. So it feels like a very timely day to be listening to students' perspective on climate change and talking about climate change. So, Julie, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts were after listening to the audio.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely a very timely time to be talking about this. And that overall, this is just a time of great unrest, and that our students are definitely grappling with that just as much or more than we are. I mean, there's a pandemic happening. There's a huge amount of social tension and unrest. And the movement for Black Lives is really up front and center. And so hopefully some really positive changes happening, but a lot of change overall that's going on, and that is definitely being absorbed by young people for sure. And my biggest impression in listening to their responses is that students, like most people, really need some tangible sources of hope right now. They need a clear vision for what the future could look like. And a lot of what the messages that they've received in the past and that they receive now are these visions of the future being, fire and hunger and drought. And we need to be showing them that it can be different. And this is what we need to work towards. So I heard from them a lot of focus on individual actions like conserving water and picking up trash. And those are all really good things. And I'm excited to hear that the students are finding hope in those smaller individual actions and everyday occurrences, which is really, really great. But I am also hearing from that as an educator that we need to get that vision of what the future could look like out to them and be emphasizing good things that are happening now for them to really hang on to, and to know that, people are moving off of the fossil fuel power grid now, that there is good policy being written now that could really change the future. So again, a lot of my response is just that call to me as an adult, as an educator, to really get that vision out there for the students and those positive examples out there. Because it's a really scary time, and I think that we all need a dose of positivity and of hope and of a clear direction to be moving towards. How about you, Ellie? How did you feel after listening to that?
Yeah, well, I was with the students while they were answering all of these questions, so it was a totally different experience to hear them all together, but I was reflecting on the experience of being there, asking them these questions, and just how nerve-wracking it is to bring up the topic of climate change with students. I think I feel a lot of anxiety around climate change, and I worry about passing that on to students or bringing up this thing that might make them scared too. And it's been really helpful to hear from a lot of students that it actually feels better for them to talk about it and that they already feel that anxiety. And when they see adults in their life actively not bringing it up, that makes it a lot worse. So yeah, I was just reminded of like how important it is to just have conversations about climate change, even if there isn't really any end goal. And I also feel like I'm in an interesting position working with a lot of youth and getting to hear their perspective, and then also talking with a lot of adults and hearing their perspective. And I think a lot of older people I talk to, and you ask that question of what gives them hope, they say, oh, young people, they're doing so great. They totally have it under control. And I hear from a lot of young people that that's super frustrating to feel like adults in their life are just giving up and that it's all on them. So I think that was another takeaway for me is like, yeah, as an adult, as an educator, that I need to be stepping up and doing what I can, and not just saying, oh yeah, the next generation, they're on top of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We know this is happening now, and so we can't wait for young people to be ready to step in. We need to be stepping in ourselves as adults now to make changes as soon as we possibly can. Time is running out real fast.
So what are some of the resources you have found recently that have been helping you envision a more sustainable future?
Yeah, definitely relying on these right now to help buoy my own emotional state. So if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, I highly recommend Project Drawdown. You can just Google search that. They've got an awesome website, and it is the most comprehensive plan for climate change that's out there at this time. So that's a really awesome resource if you want to dig into the details. I love podcasts. I am on my first podcast now. It is very exciting. But the two podcasts that I really, really enjoy right now are How to Save a Planet, which is a brand new podcast, and it's all focused on climate change solutions. The other one is Mothers of Invention, which is an awesome podcast that's focusing in on feminist solutions to climate change and how women and female identifying folks across the world are already taking really positive actions to combat climate change. So that's another awesome podcast. And the last thing I want to point folks to is the Green New Deal. I'm not trying to push anyone in any political direction, but it is the most comprehensive piece of legislation that's been put out there in response to climate change. So definitely worth just digging into the Green New Deal and looking at how climate change policy could be implemented in the United States. What about you, Ellie?
Yeah, something I'm excited to check out is a new fiction genre I just learned about called solar punk. And the people who came up with this idea are working to encourage speculative or future fiction to embody this question of what does a sustainable civilization look like and how do we get there. And they're just recognizing that there's a lot of books coming out lately that are like climate apocalypse, and that we need a little bit more creativity when we're thinking about the future. So I'm excited to go check out some of those books. We just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining us and listening to what these students have had to say and what Julie and I have to say. And we want to invite you all into this challenge that we're taking, which is to seek out sources that help you vision a more sustainable future. So whether you're an adult or a student, to go home and have a conversation with people around you about this question: what does a more sustainable and equitable future look like, and how do we get there?